Good afternoon. This is the City Council Law and Regulation Committee of May 26th. We'll do a silent roll call, but I won't be silent. With us today is Deputy Assistant. It always sounds like the deputy is a higher, Assistant City Clerk Helen Dreyer, about to become officially City Attorney Michelle Scheidenberg.
Hello.
Pardon me?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello. All right, this is must-see TV, anybody who catches this. Mr. Walensky, would you introduce your staff?
Certainly. From Electric Department, we have Utility Government Relations Administrator Amber Blix. From Environmental Utilities, we have Utility Government Relations Administrator Noel Maddock. We also have Assistant Director, Environmental Utility Director Sean Bigley. And from the Police Department, we have Rob Becerra, Police Information Officer. All members of your city's government relations team.
Very good, and we're also joined by the Deputy City Manager, Megan Scheid. Under the COVID-19 rules guidance, members of the public may offer public comment by phone by dialing into 916-774-5353. Mr. Mendonza, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes, sir.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. This is a portion of the meeting in which we take public comments on non-agenda items. Again, the number is 916-774-5353. We'll wait 30 seconds to see if anybody calls in. Okay, if I talk slow enough, that'll fill the last 15 seconds of the 30 seconds, but usually folks would be lined up if they wanted to call. The next item on our agenda is minutes. Under the minutes, it's item 5.1, minutes of the prior meeting. I found nothing in there that was that I needed to comment on. So with that, I'll take a motion for approval or a recommendation to approve the minutes of the April 28th, 2021 Law and Regulation Committee meeting.
I move to approve those minutes.
All right, and I'll second it, and it's unanimous consent. We need a roll call?
No.
Okay.
You both voted yes, right?
We both voted yes. And I scrolled right past everything else and went right to adjournment, so you know where my mind is right now. Next up, we'll begin with, as we do each of our meetings, with reports from each of our departments. We'll start with Amber Blix with the Electric Department update on priority legislation.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Haudeshell. Good afternoon, Councilmember Mendonza. I wanted to start this presentation with kind of a key overview of where we're at in the legislative session. So on May 21st, we just had the fiscal committee deadline, and that was in the first house. We have the June 4th House of Origin deadline approaching us soon. So we're basically at the halfway point where Assembly bills will then move to the Senate, and then Senate bills will move to the Assembly. And then very importantly, we have the budget bill that must pass by midnight on June 15th. My report's a little shorter this month, given that we had a lot of our bills kind of just sitting in the Appropriations Committee waiting to be heard. But a couple of issues of importance that I wanted to address with the committee today are related to SB 67, and then a couple of the budget proposals as they affect utility bill assistance, particularly on the energy side for my report. Next slide, please. So I wanted to close the loop on this bill because it's SB 67 by Becker, and it's a 24/7 clean energy standard program. And this is one that we've opposed and we've brought to the committee a few times before. The bill set new, more aggressive clean energy targets and would have required the Energy Commission to establish new POU procurement requirements for the new compliance periods. We were concerned with the bill because of potential cost increases that it would impose, and it could be very operationally difficult to implement. And really, from our perspective, was one of the most problematic energy bills that had been introduced this year. This bill is now a 2-year bill, and so we'll likely be seeing it potentially next year, but it didn't advance through the committee process this year. So it's one that we'll continue to watch, but not one that we'll have to worry about in the immediate future. In terms of the big budget proposals that we've been watching and that we think could have a real impact to the electric sector, is the Senate Drought and Ratepayer Relief Package. I'm not going to go over the drought part of that. I'm going to ask my colleague Noel with EU to talk about that, but I will focus on the Ratepayer Relief Package part. And this proposal was really one that was kind of informed by the advocacy of our trade association, the California Municipal Utilities Association, and it was a Senate proposal that was just approved in one of the budget subcommittees to appropriate $1 billion in American Recovery Act funds to address public utility arrears associated with COVID-19. And the $1 billion basically came from a statewide survey earlier in the year that assumed there was a $700 million water arrears debt on the community-owned side and $300 million on the electric side. And this is really just focusing on community-owned, publicly owned utilities within the state. There's a lot of implementation details that will follow and probably come in budget trailer bill language later this session that we'll be watching. But the general idea is that the funds will kind of flow through the California Department of Community Services, where utilities can apply and then customers can apply to ultimately offset their bills through the utility. And we find that this is really great timing for the state to be kind of looking at many of these proposals, especially as many electric utilities throughout the state are going to be reintroducing service disconnections for non-payment in the very near future. So we see the timing of this additional support as really being excellent in terms of the legislature and the governor's office kind of looking at these issues. And then in terms of advocacy, the city of Roseville supported these efforts of the Senate proposal through a coalition letter that was sent a few weeks ago to the Senate Pro Tem, the Speaker, and the governor's office. So that's one of the proposals that we're watching. Subsequent to that proposal, the governor had a week-long tour on his California Comeback Plan, where he announced that he would also be proposing a $2 billion assistance for paying past due utility bills. The difference between this and the Senate proposal is that this would apply to both public and private water, power, and gas utilities. I would say that $1 billion of the $2 billion has been slated for the energy side of things. And we've been generally supportive of this proposal as well, in that it is state recognition of customer assistance that's been needed over the last year due to COVID impacts. One thing that I do want to highlight between the two proposals is that the governor's plan really speaks to applying to low income and residential customers, whereas the Senate plan isn't specific on which customers it can apply to, and it can apply to both residential and commercial customers. And so we're generally supportive of the recognition of both of these proposals, but are very favorable of the Senate proposal because it allows us the flexibility that we may need in our community across the board in helping as many customers as we can. And that's really our goal in supporting these efforts, is to help as many customers in Roseville that have been impacted by COVID-19 economic impacts. And we're planning to actually meet with some of our local state representatives to discuss our support for these proposals, particularly the Senate proposal, later this week. So those are generally the issues that we're very involved in right now. Of course, now that the House of Origin is approaching, we'll have many more bills to bring you at the next committee hearing, but these are our main focus for this time period. So happy to answer any questions, and I know my colleagues will be providing additional info on this as well.
All right, Councilman Mendoza.
Nope. Everything looks good. Thank you.
Yeah, just you probably said it, and my ear didn't pick it up. So the Senate, this is the California Senate, not the United States
Yes.
Senate, right?
Yes, California Senate.
So this money is available to a customer regardless of whether they're residential or commercial, right? Or, a nonprofit, a church, things like that. Anybody who is a customer of a utility.
That's how I understand it, but I will preface it with the fact that many of the details are still being worked out and under discussion, so any of that could change at any point in time, but that is a large part why we're very supportive of the Senate proposal and the details there.
Great, yeah, because I imagine that while, and this may be one of those details that has to come, is how do you define, especially with Governor Newsom's proposal to kind of focus it on lower income, how does that get defined, right?
Exactly.
Because in reality, if a business owner, makes a good income but has this burden, they could end up in the other tranche pretty quickly, right?
So I'm
yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
Bruce, I
No,
just thought
go
of
right
something.
ahead.
So I'm assuming that since this is still moving through as a active bill, hasn't been finalized yet, that the municipalities throughout the region are holding off on disconnects until this gets done so they can see if this assistance is going to be available, or will this be retroactive, or do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I think many utilities throughout the state are reinstituting disconnections. I believe some have already. Many are aiming for the end of June as that kind of end of suspension on disconnections for non-payment. And Roseville is among those that are doing that. I think our goal is obviously to work with our customers to do payment plans and avoid those situations as much as possible, which is why we've begun outreach on those topics. Obviously, getting any kind of state assistance for customer arrearages would put our customers in a better spot and help the state out generally. And so I think that's why we're very supportive of these proposals going forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, end of June still gives us the time and gives the Senate the time to work out those details. So, okay, thank you.
And you may not, this may still be something to come, but the administration of that, the disbursement of the funding, would that come to the utility? It would be.
Yeah, I
It would
think,
be a little bit more efficient if the money came to the utility based upon the utility's amount of arrearages, and then all the utility did was send a bill to a customer with a big smiley face on it that said, you're caught up, versus having the customer go through a system and having inefficiencies.
yeah, I think the goal is to get money through the utility somehow to their customers in the quickest fashion as possible, and that's what we would support to help customers so that they could avoid disconnection and be helped sooner. I think a lot of that will be in the details of how these play out, and I know some of what the governor's proposal is using the low-income home energy assistance program, which exists still. So I think still a lot of the implementation details are to be seen and still to be worked out. So that's something that we'll be watching closely.
Well, thank you. I mean, this is an important thing. This is an important lifeline for those who were not back to work in the past 15 months and are facing what has to be an insurmountable catching up. So,
Especially in the summertime with no air conditioning when you don't have power.
no air conditioning, no water.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
very
report.
much.
We'll open it up for any public comment. Again, the number, if you want to comment on this, the dial-in number is 916-774-5353. And we'll wait a few seconds. While Noelle makes her way to the podium and the phone's not ringing, we'll move on to the next item, which is an update from our environmental utilities on priority legislation. And it sounds like you're going to be talking, there'll be this bridge to arrearage relief.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Hadushout and Council Member Mendonza. Just a little bit of a clarification. I just wanted to make it really clear that the shutoffs is on the electric side and
Okay.
does not affect the water side at this time.
But
Thank
there
you.
are arrearages on the water side, I assume.
Yes, we also do have arrearages on the water side, and so the package that is going through would help both.
And so there's a perfect storm of arrearages and lack of revenue due to the fact that we won't have as much water sales in the system.
Yes.
That was a comment, not a question.
Thank you.
An observation.
Marisa Tricus is actually out of the office this week, so I will actually be presenting on behalf of both the Water, Waste Services, and the Wastewater Division this afternoon. Thank you. I'm actually very excited to share with you all that 3 of our high priority bills that we were opposing were actually held in the Appropriations Committee. Those bills are AB 1434, SB 223, and AB 377. It is only through the efforts of a large and diverse coalition that we are able to say that these bills are now 2-year bills. Each of these measures had the potential to increase costs for the utilities with little to no benefit to our customers and would have ultimately resulted in rate increases for them. On a little bit of a side note on 1434, while that bill is not moving forward, the indoor residential water use objectives is an issue that DWR is supposed to be reporting back to the legislature on. And so at the time of the writing of my staff report, we had been privy to some early information on what those amounts were going to be. Since that time, they have released the draft report, and it is out for public review, which we will be commenting on. And they held their first stakeholder meeting for the report. EU government relations staff gathered information on how the proposed reduced indoor water levels would impact both the water and wastewater systems, facilities, and the financial implications. We provided that feedback to our associations, who used them in their comments during the workshop, as well as in the coalition letter that Mayor Bernasconi has just signed on to. DWR has stated that they want to have this finalized report to the legislature in June. In general, the DWR report acknowledges that there will be increased costs and impacts to both the water and wastewater systems, but there's a lack of an in-depth analysis of the costs versus the benefits, and how the lower standard will impact the targets that we will need to meet with the new conservation legislation, as well as how those financial impacts are going to end up affecting the affordability of water. If DWR does actually get the report to the legislature by June, we do anticipate that potentially AB 1434 will come back in another bill. So we will be sure to report back to the committee on both the advancement of the report as well as if AB 1434 is reintroduced this year.
I don't mean to put you on, is there a co-sponsor on the Senate side?
1434?
Right,
Not at this time.
okay. Well, that's good, right?
Yes.
If it's Hertzberger, then, that's not good, right?
Right. That's not to say
Right? I
that
understand.
won't happen.
Sort of like a zombie, right? Yeah.
Yes. So the next bill is SB 222, which is the Water Rate Assistance Program. This bill is actually moving forward. However, the biggest issue was the lack of identification of a funding mechanism for this bill, which is why we are opposed unless amended. In order to get the bill out of committee, the author did accept an amendment which would require the implementation of this to be based upon an appropriation during the budget process. So that's great news. However, that does not mean that the legislature at a later point will not come back and propose a water tax or something of the sort that could affect our customers in the future. So we're going to be watching this bill and its progress and anything surrounding the funding of it for the rest of the year and in the out years. Since the writing of the staff report, as Amber mentioned, the governor introduced his May revise, and specifically he had a drought package. She provided you a great overview of the different proposals for the arrearages issue. So I'm going to focus my attention on the specific parts of his package that deal with the drought. The Senate's proposal was a $1 billion proposal, and I provided you details in the staff report on that. So I will go ahead and focus a little bit on the governor's proposal, which is a $5.1 billion proposal. What is interesting is at this point, the Assembly still has not provided an introduction of what their proposal would be. So they're still taking feedback. Of the Senate's proposal, I will highlight there's one pot of funding that we are keenly advocating for, and that's the $200 million resilient water infrastructure pot of funding. And what we would like to do and what we are doing is going to be advocating for that to be included in whatever the Assembly puts forward, and also advocate with the governor's office to get it to be a part of his package as well. The governor's proposal is broken down into three major pots. One is for investments to support safe drinking water, water supply and reliability, and flood resiliency. And the second pot is to provide immediate drought support. And the third pot is for nature-based solutions. While the details are still being developed, I will be happy to provide those details next month in the staff report. Finally, on the governor's budget proposal, there is another pot of funding in which we are going to be supporting specifically and advocating for, and that's a $55 million pot of funding to provide grants for new composting and anaerobic digester facilities, and to expand capacity at existing wastewater facilities to increase organic waste recycling capacity, and to provide funding for co-digestion and reduced methane emissions from landfills. This pot of funding could actually benefit both of our waste services and wastewater divisions, and specifically in a future item when I start talking about the implementation of the short-lived climate pollutant regulation, this pot of funding will be very helpful for that program and what we are being required to do. And then finally on this one, for the federal, after probably about a decade, the earmark process has returned at the federal level, and the new program is now referred to as member-directed funding, where each member of Congress has the ability to submit projects for direct funding. Roseville submitted one project ourselves and are a partner on two other submittals and supported two regional transportation projects. Roseville submitted a direct funding request to both Senators Feinstein and Padilla for $3 million for the Barton Road Water resiliency project that includes solar arrays and a battery storage unit and other backup generation to assure we can continue to produce and serve clean water to our customers without fear of being impacted by future public safety power shutoffs. Then through PCWA, we are seeking funding for a conveyance facility and additional interties that will help reduce Roseville's reliance on Folsom Reservoir and help with the regional resiliency. And through RWA, we are seeking funding for projects that will help the region in implementing the water bank. Additionally, Roseville supported 2 transportation projects submitted by the county and the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. As reported in the staff report, we supported PCTPA's request to Senator Feinstein for the I-80 auxiliary lanes. And in addition, the county submitted the Placer Parkway project to Senator Padilla. The Placer Parkway is a 14.2-mile high-speed transportation facility that will link existing and planned development in the region. The Parkway will provide an alternative to Interstate 80 and the local transportation network. The Parkway will also relieve congestion on busy routes and provides a more direct route for travel and goods movement. Next slide. So at the outset, I let you guys know that AB 377, thankfully, was held in appropriations and is now a 2-year bill. So I will focus on the next 2 bills. SB 289, unfortunately, did not make it out of appropriations as well. While we supported this measure, the hiccup or the concern was the $2 million ongoing price tag for the hazardous waste control account, which is currently underfunded at about $30 million. And so at this time, they did not see, even though the $2 million price tag on the EPR program, which is the producer's program for batteries, was not feasible. The governor does have funding and proposals in his budget package, which would be in a trailer bill. It has not passed, but there is potential that his proposals will help that account in the future, and so we may see this come back. The next bill is SB 619. This bill actually was amended shortly after our last committee meeting, and what it will do is it will provide some assurances for local jurisdictions like Roseville who are implementing the short-lived climate pollutant regulation. And what it would do is it would stave off fines until January 1st of 2023, so long as we are making reasonable efforts. This is important because the adopted regulation is actually very broad in scope and impacts the entire city of Roseville, from purchasing requirements for paper products, composting, refuse collection, and more. We are currently working internally across all departments to assure we are in compliance, but in the off chance we are not able to satisfy every aspect of the regulation, it would be nice to know that our efforts are being recognized and we will not be subject to fines until 2023. This measure actually received broad support in the Senate and is now moved over to the Assembly, where it's awaiting its first committee hearing. And as was mentioned last month in the staff report, both AB 818 and SB 273 enjoy bipartisan support. This actually paved the way for these bills to pass out of their House of Origin on consent, which is highly unusual. AB 818 is now in the Senate awaiting its first hearing, to be assigned to its first committee, and SB 273 is in the Assembly awaiting its first hearing in local government, and then it will be referred to the Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee. We are anticipating that these bills will receive similar bipartisan support in the second houses, and we will keep you up to date on their progress. Lastly, Senate bill at the federal level, 914, is the Senate's $35 billion Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Assistance Act. The funding will go to support the State Revolving Fund, the WIFIA, and stormwater treatment needs, among other water-related needs. As outlined in the staff report, there are several pots of funding that we are reviewing and believe the city would be benefited by that funding. As the House and Senate begin to reconcile their proposals, we will report back to this committee. And that concludes EU's presentation, if you have any questions.
Councilmember Mendoza.
I am excited, as I was last month, that AB 818 is moving forward. It can't move fast enough, but I just was curious, and if you don't know, that's okay. I'm putting you on the spot, but what's the phase-out plan on this? I mean, there's a good chance it's going to pass. The Senate. It's got bipartisan support, and I think everybody that has chimed in on this sees the need for this. But I'm just wondering, are we talking like I'm sure there's a certain time frame where this, to the manufacturers and they stop becoming available. What is that, or do we know?
I do not know.
Couple months, couple years. I mean, I'm assuming it's probably like 1 or 2 years because there's so many in the pipeline. No pun intended. But I mean, they're on the shelves, and they're out there. But I'm just thinking, before recess, we're mid-year. So even if it got past that third hurdle after, there's a committee you mentioned or an organization that after it passes, it still has to get approved.
So with 818,
yeah,
it is in the second house. So it needs to go through the second house, which it will go through a committee hearing process, which it's heard on for policy reasons. Then it will go through appropriations, and then it will go back to the floor of the Senate. And then it will be sent back to the Assembly for concurrence if there's any amendments that happen in the Senate. As for the time frame, I wish I could tell you. I do not know that detail, but would be happy to circle back with you if there is an expected time frame in there. I believe Marisa last month did mention, and it was in the staff report.
Okay, I'll go back and look.
No, that there was a lawsuit that just was resolved that actually helps the case of this legislation. So it was in support of the product being removed and not being noted as being flushable. So that's seen as a very positive step forward on that.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Can you pull up your first slide, or can you pull up her first slide? Looking for it in the staff report. You had a bill 616, didn't you?
619?
619. It was the indoor water usage?
That's 1434.
1434, okay.
Yes.
So how much, and I do want to talk about 619. What was DWR's proposal on indoor water use? Is this the infamous, you get 55 gallons a day?
For the first year, they did keep the 55 gallons per person per day. However, in the out years, that was actually reduced, and I'm not seeing the specifics
It's okay.
that I wrote down.
Yeah. Now, my question, and I'm...
I didn't get that. Could you try?
Yeah, I can try. I can try again.
She's outsourcing to Siri because she doesn't know.
So no doubt.
Sorry.
Couldn't have been timed better. No offense to Bruce, but that's...
I thought it was my Siri. So I guess the question is, and I'm sure this has been raised, is it appears as if when you reduce water, there's an unintended consequence of increasing rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be in direct conflict with safe, affordable drinking water. So my question is simply, is that getting any traction when it's raised? I assume that all the smart people, including yourself down there, are raising that issue, that there's...
So the DWR process, it was supposed to be a very healthy stakeholder process, and thus far it hasn't been. They literally just held their very first workshop after producing the report. And so it was the first time they were receiving a lot of this
input. On your mind
input.
right now, trying to figure out where the snow went, right?
Yes, directly into the ground.
Yeah.
So, but I do have those figures, but yes.
It was really the larger point of there seems to be a conflict,
There's a very huge conflict of that. We don't know if it's resonating, but that is one of the arguments that has been made.
Because it has the potential to impact those who can least afford or more price sensitive on rate increases.
Yes.
619 is the I think this is the keep the banana peels out of the landfill bill.
Yes.
Okay. And one more thing, where was it? Nope, I think that was it. There was something else, but I'll circle back around after this.
Yeah, so specifically 619 is dealing with the organics issue that I mentioned for the regulation.
Have a separate container.
Yes.
You can't put any lawn clippings that have been treated with pesticide.
Correct.
the
However,
landfill.
there's actually a lot more. A huge portion of that is a mandate for all local governments to be purchasing recycled paper products. There's in organics a mandatory purchasing requirement that we would have to purchase.
Okay.
So there's a lot of aspects of it to it, and I know Waste Services is all over it from their perspective. And we recently held a meeting for all of the city departments to get together and kind of wrap our heads around all of the other aspects of the bill that need to be in the regulation that need to be implemented. This bill simply would put off the ability of Cal Recycle to institute fines for not meeting the regulation.
2023 is right around the corner, though.
It is. It's literally only a year's extension of time. And again, we are working diligently to make sure that we're meeting those regulatory requirements. But just on the off chance that we just aren't able to meet it, this would definitely help us with that assurance that we aren't going to be fined for all of our effort.
I do want to express my appreciation for anybody who has to go down to that white dome building that's surrounded by reality and try to bring in some very reasonable and pragmatic solutions or to identify what the solution is. So, don't take any of my comments as not appreciating the task at hand here. Our environmental utilities coordination with PCWA, is that OFER, the intertie at OFER, or is that the...
Mr. Ridley?
There he comes.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. So really what that is right now we're working through some concepts, roughly about $28 million total in projects. With regard to the smaller package of projects that we're looking for to expedite based on the current drought situation and to really kind of build more capacity within the system, really looking at about $2 million worth of projects of that $28 million total. It is not related to OFER, but it does add some additional capacity in the system, most specifically, expanding intertie capacity, as well as some conveyance facilities that allow us to get access to our PCWA Middle Fork project supply as an alternative to the intake at Folsom Reservoir. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Appreciate that. Any other questions?
I'm good.
Hang on, we'll see if we have anybody who wants to call in. Again, the number's 916-774-5353. Don't even have to look down anymore. It's kind of... All right. Don't hear anyone. I don't hear the phone ringing. All right, thank you for that, and please extend our well wishes to Marisa Trikas for a speedy recovery. All right, next up, we have priority legislation. You ready? Mr. Walensky.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Hodeschelt and Councilmember Mendoza. Once again, Mark Walensky, Government Relations Administrator, and I'm joined this afternoon for this presentation by Rob Becerra, Police Department's Public Information Officer. Our presentation is an overview of the city's priority list of legislation and other areas of concern or interest. But before we go forward, I'd like to correct a glaring omission from the beginning of the meeting when I was asked to introduce the Government Relations team. And I failed to introduce the most important member of the team, and that's Deputy City Manager Megan McPherson-Scheid, who is responsible for the team and is involved and integrated in all aspects of what the team does, its goals and objectives, and the team relies on her insights and perspectives greatly. The error is mine, and I apologize for the oversight.
Rob, can you stand and we'll have Megan... No, I'm just...
By way of
Thank you. You know, because I just figured that she was a deputy city manager responsible for all things communication, which included government affairs. So thanks for highlighting her role on the government affairs team.
Absolutely. By way of background, our report this afternoon includes an overview of some of the key priority bills with a particular focus on public safety, housing, land use, and homelessness. This report provides an overview of the track legislation the police department has identified as most critical, a series of bills that represents the range of issues that are important to many city departments, including the planning, development services, and housing departments, and other important information related to the governor's May revision. So transitioning to public safety, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Rob Becerra, the police department's public information officer. Rob?
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Vice Mayor, Mr. Council Member. Really a very brief update from public safety at this point because Amber did touch on the noted deadlines that are coming up. Continuing to track our top 20, which you have helped us to identify. Some good news from the front of SB 210. That was the LPR data retention bill that was moving forward. It is being held in appropriations. We're still tracking it as a 2-year bill, but it would be fairly expensive to try and run that because I think most agencies would have to adjust their LPR programs to be able to dump the data in 24 hours as it was requested by the bill. The other one that is we continue to track and it's ongoing is SB 210, which is the piece of legislation around certification and decertification of officers. It is still moving forward, but we are seeing some amendments made to the language. The author is working with trade organizations, CPOA specifically, and right now we're working on the language of specific intent. And I'm certain that the city attorney would be able to provide a much better detail than I would, but it really falls to the officer specifically intending to break the law when they carry out an action. So something that will continue to get hammered out in the language, as well as the discussion about qualified immunity. So SB 210 still alive and moving forward, but right now we're seeing some positive moves on it. So we've found those as 2 wins so far in the process. I did want to just mildly mention, and we can go to the next slide, mention the conversation that's happening at the federal level over police reform. This obviously has been an ongoing conversation even long before the death of Mr. Floyd. But this year, the House of Representatives passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which bans chokeholds. It would end qualified immunity. Several other items dealing with racial profiling, banning no-knock warrants, limiting military equipment. It's a very robust piece of legislation moving forward. It's currently held up in the Senate, and one of the key negotiators in the Senate who is working on this is Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina. And he actually came out very recently and said he set an arbitrary deadline for June. So his exact words were June or bust. Now, we definitely support some form of this piece of legislation moving forward, but obviously have some significant concerns over various aspects of it, qualified immunity being one, or I should say the elimination of qualified immunity. So obviously two pieces we continue to track, working with our government affairs teams, all members of the government affairs team in moving forward police legislation. And that is the end of my report, if you have any questions.
Councilmember Mendoza?
You answered all of my questions, Rob. I appreciate the updates. And I would agree, we certainly need to keep a watchful eye on this federal, just some of the high-level items that you hit on, and I'm sure there's a much lengthier list that you just didn't go into detail on, but just the ones you did, they hit my ear in a very concerning note. Just from a municipality of our size, I could see where this would hinder us to perform duties that we currently do and gain the benefit of having the freedom to exercise in that space, without those restrictions. So I'd be anxious to hear the updates as they come forward and what changes. It looks like by the end of next month, if that still holds true. So I'm looking forward to an update on that, because I'm concerned a little of the other ones that you mentioned, but it sounds like those are starting to trend in a direction that we are happy with. But this federal bill does raise some concerns, at least for me, and I'm sure for other people in that space as well. So I look forward to your report next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to follow up on Councilmember Mendoza's comments, it's welcome news about the license plate reader. Certainly that's an important tool in the arsenal, right? And without it, or it with inhibition, with restrictions on it, we would not be able to keep our community as safe as we've been able to. So that's welcome news. Thank you for that. Thanks for that update.
Thank you.
Okay, and so next, with respect to housing and land use, 4 bills that were included in the staff report. We're only going to focus on 2 because I can confirm with you, since the writing of the report, that SB 765 and SB 695 both have become 2-year bills and are not moving forward. So with respect to AB 1401, this bill would prohibit a local government from imposing a minimum automobile parking requirement or enforcing a minimum parking requirement on residential, commercial, or other development if the development is located on a parcel that is within 1/2 mile walking distance of public transit. The city has taken an opposed position on this bill, as it would essentially allow developers to dictate parking requirements in vast areas of the city, because the definition of public transit includes entire bus corridors, not just high-frequency bus stops or major transit stops. Assembly Bill 989, this bill would establish a housing accountability committee and authorize an applicant who proposes a housing development project through the Housing Accountability Act to appeal a local agency's decision on the project application to the committee. The city has also taken an opposed position on this bill, as it would allow a single hearing officer to substitute their judgment about the public health or safety of a community and overturn a denial following procedures that are not subject to public review and comment. The bill would allow a single hearing officer to overturn these actions if a developer argues that they make the project infeasible following procedures that are not subject to public review and comment. With respect to other areas of interest, as you've heard in the earlier presentations, Governor Newsom provided his May revision of the state budget earlier this month. In the plan, the governor includes a proposal to provide $12 billion to address homelessness. The funding includes a massive expansion of Project Home Key and other similar strategies to get housing up and running quickly. Investing $8.75 billion to unlock at least 46,000 new homeless housing units and affordable apartments. The plan also focuses on those with the most acute needs, with at least 28,000 new beds and housing placements for clients with behavioral needs and seniors at highest risk of homelessness. Under the plan, the state also seeks to functionally end family homelessness within 5 years through a new $3.5 billion investment in homelessness prevention, rental support, and new housing opportunities for people at risk of homelessness. And the plan also includes nearly $50 million in targeted programs and grants to local governments to move people out of unsafe, unhealthy encampments and into safer, more stable housing. With respect to advocacy strategies, during the past several L&R meetings, the committee had asked several questions about advocacy strategies, and we wanted to provide this overview for the committee of the process that the team follows to develop advocacy strategies. The foundation of the state and federal advocacy program is the identification and implementation of advocacy positions on legislation and regulations that are of particular concern or interest to the city. Increasing costs from regulation and new legislation affects the fiscal health of the city. Subsequently, the city has taken a strong, proactive role to increase its visibility and influence within the region on the state and federal level. These efforts provide a gateway to greater engagement and dialogue with federal and state decision makers on issues affecting the city's fiscal health. Subsequently, the City Council has set a legislative platform that focuses on preserving local control, providing financial flexibility, preventing unfunded mandates, protecting residents and businesses from costly state and federal regulations, and protecting the general fund, enterprise fund, and local sales tax and property tax revenues. The beginning of developing advocacy positions, including staff reviewing all bills introduced the bill introduction period, and identifying bills of interest for all city departments. Bills of interest are those that have implication to the priorities defined within the City Council's approved legislative and regulatory platform. Once all bills have been identified, staff begins the process of defining advocacy positions and strategies for each of the bills. The positions staff will assign to a bill include the following. Watch, the bill is of interest but does not currently require a formal position. Support, this is a bill that is in alignment with the legislative and regulatory platform. Support if amended. Overall, the intent of the bill is favorable, but there is an element or elements of the bill that are concerning. Staff will work to have amendments taken on the bill that will allow the city to support the bill. Oppose, this is a bill that is not in alignment with the legislative and regulatory platform. And oppose unless amended. And there is an element or elements of the bill that are concerning, and staff will work to have amendments taken on the bill that will allow the city to remove the opposition position. And then finally, with advocacy strategies, very often the position for a bill is determined easily because the content of the bill is straightforward and without controversy. However, many bills take time and will require additional research and analysis and input from the staff, the city's other staff, the city's lobbyist team, stakeholders, community organizations, and industry associations before a final determination is made on a specific bill or regulation. Additional aspects that are crucial in the development of a position include the following. The legislative calendar. Understanding the calendar ensures staff has defined the advocacy position at the most appropriate time within the legislative process. The magnitude of the bill. Bills of major significance may require the city to take a more nuanced approach to advocacy. For many bills, the government relations team will communicate directly to a committee and/or the bill author regarding the city's position. This process is very effective. However, there are times when the city will take a position by joining the efforts of a larger organization or industry group such as the League of California Cities, the Regional Water Authority, or the Northern California Power Agency. State and national organizations. The city will often support the effort of these larger organizations when it is determined that the city's interests are most effectively conveyed not as an individual city, but as part of a collective effort that has a greater presence and voice in the legislative process. Throughout the course of the legislative and congressional years, staff is constantly monitoring and modifying the bills being tracked. Advocacy positions may change, bills may be added or dropped from the list as the year unfolds, and actions and amendments are taken on specific bills. The process is fluid and dynamic, and it requires the constant attention and interaction of the government relations team to ensure the effectiveness of the effort. And finally, I wanted to share with the committee how this process and this network has other benefits outside of the legislative process. So I understand that early yesterday that the City Council was on a bus tour and saw the construction and drove by a construction of a bridge project. That bridge project earlier this year had challenges with permitting with a state agency. Staff from the Development Services Department contacted me and asked if there was any support that we could provide through the legislative process to help with that permitting. And we did. We talked with the city's state lobbyist, and we also talked with Senator Nielsen's office to find out what help that they could provide to this process because of the importance of the project to the city and the community for development, not only currently this year, but in the out years, next year and the following years on the west side. The challenge with the permit was that it was with the Central Valley Floodplain Board. And the project, if it wasn't able to go forward this year, it has a very short window, a construction window because of it being in the creek. It had to be completed by October of this year. And if the project didn't go forward this year, it would have to wait a whole year before it could be constructed. And I'm pleased to say that because of the lobbyist interaction and the people that they contacted, so Jason Gonzalez and the people that he contacted, the people that Senator Nielsen's office contacted, the board staff put an expedited process to the permit request. They were able to get on this month's agenda and were able to start construction this month, which will allow them to complete construction within the time frame. So the network and the relationships that the government relations process has and has created has benefit outside of just the legislative process, and I wanted to share that with the committee. So in conclusion, the government relations staff will continue to work with city departments to develop advocacy strategies for each of the bills on the list, and will inform the city's state and federal representatives regarding the city's position as the bills move through the legislative process. And of course, in addition, staff will continue to bring the updated list to this committee for their input and comments on any of the bills. And this concludes our presentation, and we're prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Councilmember Mendoza.
Nope, Mark, I appreciate everything that you said. Thank you for the updates, and I'm pleased that we're continuing to increase our presence, as far as our advocacy. And thank you for further defining our advocacy positions as well. That was nice to see.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Councilmember Mendoza said. So thank you. It's always good to have as familiar as I'm not, I have a little familiarity, but it's always good to remember the milestones and the process itself. So thank you for including that. We'll open it up for any public comment by anyone who wishes to comment on the report by Mr. Becerra, the report by Mr. Walensky on the housing bills or the process, can do so by dialing 916-774-7373. All right. Our next meeting is going to be,
3rd, Wednesday, June 23rd.
well, I think we got a problem. I'm not here.
No.
I don't think our alternate is here. Should we consider, there is a 4th Thursday? Should we consider
So we
that?
we'll look at the calendar and contact you and the alternate and look for an alternate date in June.
Okay, yeah. Because the budget will have been adopted, the trailer bills will be going through, and so there'll be a lot of organized chaos, right? Is that what that is? Unless there's anything else to come before us, we're adjourned. Thank you.